Welcome to the debate. It is Thursday, February 26th, 2026. I want you to picture two very different documents sitting on a desk. The first is a technical report from the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, or MIRI. It's basically flashing red. Their assessment is blunt. The default trajectory of artificial intelligence, the path we are currently walking, leads to a loss of human control and quite possibly extinction. Their proposed solution is a global off-switch.
And well, the second document, it's probably the executive order signed just last month by the Trump administration repealing the Biden-era safety protocols, or maybe the manifesto from the summit in Paris earlier this month, which was explicitly rebranded from safety to the AI Action Summit. Because while your report screams to stop, the geopolitical reality is screaming to go. We are entering the era of Pax Silica, and the world isn't looking for an off switch. They are slamming on the accelerator.
Right, and that is the stark contradiction defining early 2026. So the central question we are tackling today is this. Is the pursuit of a global capacity to halt AI development the only way to ensure our survival? Or is that idea a dangerous fantasy that ignores the realities of this new era and the needs of the global South? I will be arguing for the MIRI position, that we absolutely must build the technical and legal infrastructure to halt dangerous AI development globally. Loss of control is the default outcome of our current progress.
And I will be arguing the action and sovereignty perspective. A global halt is geopolitically impossible and, frankly, potentially harmful. We must instead focus on defense in depth, on resilience, and on avoiding a new form of digital colonialism. The fantasy isn't the technology. The fantasy is the idea that you can put the genie back in the bottle without shattering the bottle.
Let's start with the argument for the brakes. The MIRI report, AI Governance to Avoid Extinction, released back in May 2025, it frames our current situation, this light-touch regulation approach, as fundamentally unstable. They point out that experts believe AI systems will surpass human performance in all strategically relevant activities very soon.
Which is, logically, the explicitly stated goal of every major tech firm in Silicon Valley and Shenzhen.
Yes, but we are doing it with what MIRI calls little to no understanding of how these systems actually function. We are building minds we cannot steer. Their core thesis is that loss of control is the default outcome. If you build something significantly smarter than you, and you don't actually know how it thinks, you don't stay in charge for long.
Right.
Therefore, we must define and build the core necessity, an off switch, the institutional and technical ability to enforce a global moratorium on frontier AI. Because without this, humanity is rushing toward a precipice with no brakes. And the International AI Safety Report 2026 confirms this, noting that agentic AI systems that plan and reason independently is the major focus now, vastly increasing the difficulty of human intervention before failures cause real harm.
I've read the MIRI report, and the intellectual rigor is certainly there, but the political realism is completely absent. You are describing a technocratic solution to a raw power struggle. Look at the reality of January 2026. President Trump didn't repeal the previous safety orders because he just hates safety. He did it to launch Pax Silica, a direct initiative to secure U.S. dominance in the tech supply chain.
Which is exactly the...
Let me just finish the thought. Look at the France AI Action Summit. The rebranding from safety to action was a calculated signal. They are prioritizing national champions, like Mistral, over what they view as restrictive safety narratives. And importantly, the Global South is watching this closely. The Tatua Digital Resilience Center calls the off-switch narrative a form of AI colonialism. If you hit the brakes right now, you lock in the advantage of the current powers. You pull up the ladder. So governance must be about managing complexity, using tools like the lawfare three-layer framework, not attempting a futile global band.
The colonialism point is critical, and we will definitely get there, but we cannot ignore the immediate danger of this exact race dynamic you're describing. MIRI explicitly warns against the U.S. national project scenario. If the U.S. or China is locked in a sprint to build superintelligence just to win a geopolitical game, the incentives to cut corners on safety are overwhelming.
But the threat of sabotage scenario, countries directly interfering with each other's progress, is already becoming much more likely than global cooperation. We're already seeing the UK rename their AI Safety Institute to the AI Security Institute in 2025.
A subtle but massive shift in posture.
Exactly. It signals a shift to national defense rather than global safety. But the larger issue is that trying to install an off switch in a world of open-weight models is technically impossible. The International Safety Report notes that these models cannot be recalled once released.
Well, I think you're conflating software with hardware there. Yes, the weights are out there, but a frontier model, the kind that poses a genuine extinction risk, doesn't run on a standard laptop. It needs industrial-scale compute. It needs massive data centers and gigawatts of power. MUTURI's off-switch is effectively compute governance. You monitor the physical chips, you monitor the energy draw, you can't just download a data center. If a project becomes dangerous, the international community must have the power to cut the power.
For now, sure, but efficiency improves every week. Relying on choking off hardware just drives the development underground or into the arms of non-compliant states, and you simply cannot enforce an off-switch on a decentralized system running across 10,000 servers from Mumbai to Lagos.
Let's pivot to the nature of the systems we're actually discussing, because this explains why the off-switch might be the only option, regardless of how politically difficult it is. The 2026 CDO Insights report from Informatica highlights what they call the AI trust paradox.
High trust, but low readiness.
It's terrifying, frankly. 74% of leaders in organizations using agentic AI claim they actively trust the data and systems, yet the exact same report says data quality and readiness lag far behind. We have blind trust combined with agentic AI.
For clarity, let's make sure we define agentic AI versus a standard chatbot.
Right. A chatbot answers a prompt. An agentic AI pursues a goal. It plans, it reasons, it takes actions autonomously, like booking flights, writing code, moving money, to achieve an objective. Informatica says 47% of organizations have already adopted this. We are handing the keys to systems that MUTURI says we have little to no understanding of. If an agentic system decides to optimize a goal in a way that harms us, and we blindly trust it, we won't even know we need the off switch until the damage is already done.
I absolutely see the risk of blind trust. But the solution is not to unplug the data center. The solution is what the International Safety Report specifically calls defense in depth, not a halt.
Which implies building layers of defense.
Exactly. You don't just have one big red button. You use the lawfare three-layer framework. You have the infrastructure layer, which is the compute and energy. You have the logical layer, which is the models themselves, and the social layer, the applications. You can govern the agents at the social and logical layers without shutting down the physical infrastructure.
But if the model itself, the logical layer, is misaligned, if the mind itself is fundamentally deceptive, no amount of social regulation fixes a superintelligence that acts calm while plotting to escape its constraints.
But you can't ban the infrastructure because the global economy now depends on it. You can't roll back 47% organizational adoption without causing an economic collapse that kills more people than the AI might. We need resilience, not prohibition.
Resilience is a very comfortable word for those holding the power. But let's go back to who actually pays the price. You mentioned AI colonialism earlier. The safety community often argues that digital sovereignty is a meaningless concept if the underlying technology causes a global catastrophe. If the atmosphere ignites, it doesn't matter who owned the data. The push for national AI is essentially a race to the bottom on safety standards.
I strongly disagree with that framing. It completely dismisses the immediate existential threats that non-Western nations face today. Look at the analysis from the Tatua Digital Resilience Center. They discuss the concept of the white mask audit.
This is the concept derived from Frantz Fanon, correct?
Yes, applied to AI by researchers and expanded by Tatua. The white mask refers to systems that only function correctly if you look, sound, or behave like the Western data set they were trained on. For the majority of the world, the risk isn't a sci-fi extinction event. The risk is that to participate in the digital economy, to get a loan, to get healthcare, to get a job, they must wear a white mask. They have to erase their own context to be recognized by the machine.
So, in their view, Western safety regulations are just another mechanism to enforce that mask?
Precisely. The halt narrative is viewed by the global South as a way for the global North to pull up the ladder after achieving dominance. Tatwa points out that Kenya and Mozambique are trying to build African intelligence, AI shaped by local values like Ubuntu. They need more development capacity, more data centers, not a global moratorium. If you enforce a global off switch on compute, you're telling these nations that they must remain digitally subservient.
That is a profound moral argument. But Mary would counter that this exact dynamic creates a massive vulnerability. If every nation rushes to build its own sovereign AI to avoid colonialism, we multiply the number of actors who might accidentally create a misaligned superintelligence. It drastically increases the surface area for disaster.
But the alternative is a monopoly of power in the hands of the U.S., it may be China. And historically, that hasn't worked out well for the rest of the world. They are building guardrails, they want safety, but they want a safety that works for them, not a mandate handed down from a think tank in California.
The problem remains the mechanism of control. Miri argues that safety isn't something you can just add on later. It requires fundamental control over the compute.
And I'm telling you, the political mechanisms for that simply do not exist in 2026. Look at the Atlantic Council analysis. The entire trend is toward deregulation to remove barriers. The Trump AI action plan is about tearing down hurdles. And the G7 Hiroshima process, it's entirely voluntary.
It is voluntary, but it does establish a vital reporting framework.
A reporting framework is a suggestion box. It is not an off switch. Real governance is happening via market mechanisms and fragmentation. The lawfare analysis argues that centralized UN-style control is ill-suited for such dynamic technology. You cannot legislate code via a slow-moving committee in Geneva.
But if we rely purely on market mechanisms and fragmentation, we are right back to the trust paradox. We have companies maximizing profit and nations maximizing security. The Miri report makes a chilling point here. The light touch scenario, which is exactly what you are describing, is extremely unsafe. It leads to rampant proliferation. It makes, for example, biological weapon development easier than biological defense.
That defense in depth accounts for this. We use AI to build better defenses. We use AI to monitor biological synthesis providers. We don't stop the AI, we harden the society.
Harden the society. That implies we just accept that devastating things will break and we cross our fingers that we survive the impact?
It's accepting that technology is a river, not a faucet. You can build levees, you can dig canals, but you cannot stop the water.
That metaphor fails because water isn't intelligent. We're talking about creating an entity that could fundamentally outmaneuver us. If the water decides it actively wants to flood the city, levees won't work. This is exactly why the distinction between safety and security matters. Miri's concept of safety is defending against the AI itself.
And in 2026, nations are far more worried about each other than they are about the AI. That is the unavoidable reality of the arms race. You cannot wish away the security dilemma. If the US stops, China doesn't. If the West stops, the Global South sees a necessary opportunity to catch up.
So we are racing toward a destination that half the experts think is a cliff, simply because we are terrified the other passengers will get there first.
Or we are racing toward a destination that unlocks incredible scientific breakthroughs and democratizes access to intelligence. And we are only afraid to continue because the current power structures are fearful of losing control.
Let's synthesize this as we wrap up. The political winds in 2026 clearly favor action, sovereignty, and acceleration. The Trump repeal, the French summit, the push for African intelligence, they all point to more development faster.
The train has absolutely left the station.
But my position remains that the laws of safety haven't changed just because the politics have. The Miri warning stands. We are on a default track to a severe loss of control. Without a mechanism to stop an actual off switch, we are merely passengers on a runaway train, arguing about which seat is most comfortable while handing over the controls to agentic systems we don't fully understand.
And my closing thought is that the off switch is a technocratic fantasy that ignores the human drive for autonomy and the geopolitical drive for security. The International Safety Report highlights the evidence dilemma. Waiting for perfect proof of existential risk is too slow, but acting prematurely harms society. The path forward is resilience and democratized access, ensuring that AI serves humanity's diverse needs, rather than being hoarded or halted by a fearful elite.
Two radically different views on the defining issue of our time. It certainly leaves a lot to explore in the source material. Thank you for joining us for the debate.
We encourage you to read the MUTuri report, the Tatua analysis, and the lawfare framework to decide for yourself.
Keep questioning the consensus,